Great. Okay. Yeah, that's a very good point. As long as I stay within the church, there's a lot of people who get hives just driving by a church, right? So they're not going to come in. And so we've had to do a lot of media stuff that shows that we're not exclusively a church, but we're a church, right? And that's been a conversation that's been going on in the congregation for some time. You know, I talked about removing the barrier of theistic language. Our conversation is now about the barrier of being a church and the barrier of Sunday morning gathering, right? Like, because not that you shouldn't gather on a Sunday morning, but we do the stand up, sit down, pass the plate thing. Like, we look like a church. You come in, you're going to stand up and sing hymns. You're going to sit down. You're going to listen to readings. You're going to hear someone talk up front. You're going to pass the collection plate. Like, it looks and smells like church, right? So that's a barrier to participation. So we want to figure out other ways to get around that. That's a very important element in our current conversations.
I think one of the problems is, from the business point of view, is that you get a tax-free status as a church, and that the political definition of church has to have God in.
Yes.
Which is why, as humanists, we have to fight really hard to try and get status, tax-free status, under an educational label.
You're quite right. The Canada's charity identifications are archaic, like they were written in the mid-19th century. When we sought charitable registration for the Canadian Centre for Progressive Christianity, we identified it as a religious group, right? And that triggered a review within the charities division because we had identified we were not theistic. And so they did a whole, like, just months, we couldn't figure out what was going on. And it turned out they were reviewing the whole thing because they didn't know whether we could count there because we were non-theistic, right? So eventually they did pass us, they did review the whole thing, and they left theistic in there, that you had to believe in a theistic God. And I think that they left it in there so that they could make a decision on an every individual application process. So Buddhist organizations, which do not believe in a theistic God, can get a religious designation because they're approved individually. But, a preschool that calls itself religious, but is, teaching that there are fairies in the grass, they might not get a designation, right? So I think they were afraid of opening that door too wide. But you're quite right. And I think that the whole charities registration thing needs to be overhauled because the three categories they don't represent what's going on in society right now. So you've got education, social welfare, and religion. And they're just blunt objects, right?
You talked about the kind of theological education that your colleagues received and how that led to the kind of the belief climate of the clergy in the United Church. And so I'm guessing, and you can comment on it, that I'm guessing more than half of them probably would not have survived the questions that you were posed during that questioning period. So I'm curious to hear you talk about where this leaves them. And it seems to me, in some senses, that you've been found guilty of being honest.
So so the question, just to repeat it, is when an educated clergy come to those same questions that I was asked, would they be able to answer them affirmatively?
And what do they do now? Because
what do they do now?
They're hiding.
Well, and there's a big conversation going on. I mean, a lot of what has gone down over the last while has. A lot of my colleagues are very upset that I have said that I think that many of them don't believe in a traditional God, right? Only I use the word non-theistic, that they're non-theistic, right? And a lot of them took a lot of offense at that because their understandings of God, well, I don't know how they could possibly shoehorn them into a Trinitarian belief system or say yes to those questions. Over half of them on a recent, very conservatively skewed survey, over half of them still came up identifying as panentheistic, right? Which is not, it's so, I can't even figure out what the heck a panentheistic, idea of God is, right? I'm certain that whoever they're preaching to has no idea that that's what they believe, right? And that when they use the word God, they mean God, right? Not something else. So there is a conversation taking place on Facebook, and yeah, the question is how many clergy could answer these questions, and most of them are saying nobody else is going to be asked those questions,
Right.
and maybe nobody else will. But I think it is a very big concern if you have clergy who protect themselves with affirmative responses to questions that don't reflect their beliefs. And I think that is part of how the United Church has abdicated its responsibility to Canadians, because it has not said, when we use the word, by the way, when I use the word God, I don't mean like God, right? I'll tell you what I mean Saturday for coffee. Me for coffee, I'll tell you what I mean. But on Sunday, I'm not going to say that again, right? I'm just going to talk about God, right? And let you assume. And I mean, I know my colleagues don't like me saying that, but it's kind of the truth, right? So on Facebook, a conversation is taking place right now about whether to have an equivalent of a TED Talks called God Talks. You are totally missing the point. No one out there is interested in a God talk, right? Like you can, and this is where I use the term masturbation quite regularly. It's ecclesial masturbation and theological masturbation and liturgical masturbation, right? Like that's what it is, and it's not pretty to watch. No one wants to see it, right? And it's only A, you're only making yourself feel better, and B, you're not going to have a lot of offspring, right? Like really, it's a dead end. So, we got to get over that, basically. But they don't like it when I talk like that. Anyway. Anyone else? Yep.
So for how long do you think for yourself you're gonna just can maintain your position over there, so, the pastor?
We're talking hours? Hours? I don't know. I mean, my congregation, the one really good thing about this situation is I'm not the only person talking about what we do anymore. My congregation, to a person, is articulate about what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it, why it's important, why it should remain in the United Church, and why they're getting really fed up with the United Church. Like, they understand what it is we're doing. They know why it's so significant. And so they're galvanized around a core idea that I think is transformational within society. It has been down through the ages in different iterations, and I think it's coming into being now in a different way, right? So, I don't know how long I'll be able to be at West Hill, but I know that I will be with that community for the foreseeable future, and I know that I will also be committed to creating other communities like this. And I mean, we've had requests from. With the article that came out in the Atlantic, there's been requests from out west, London, Ottawa, Toronto. Like, there's a lot of interest in how to do this.
Anything like this in the United States or not yet?
All over the place, yeah.
Oh, really?
Not in the churches, no. The Oasis Network started in 2012. Mike Aus, who was the pastor of a small independent church, went on NBC or something. What's it called? Yeah. Went on that and came out as an atheist on the morning show one day. And that was the end of his relationship with his congregation. As a matter of fact, that was the end of the congregation. They locked their doors and closed down. So a couple of weeks later, some of the members from the congregation said, it was never about the God thing. Like, it was about getting together. So let's do this. Let's find a way that we can continue together. So they formed the Houston Oasis. And then a couple of years later, someone in Kansas City Googled atheist church, found Mike. She now runs one in Kansas City that draws 180 to 200 people on a Sunday. Mike's is about the same size. And now there's one in Boston. There's several in Utah. I think there's 3 in Utah with ex-Mormons who are coming together. They know the value of community. They know how important it is. But they're coming together around secular principles, and that's what they're doing. The Sunday Assembly has also drawn a considerable amount of attention. Those of us who are now affiliated with the Oasis Network think, and our experience at West Hill and the West End, is that once a month is not enough, and the Sunday Assembly has usually been once a month. So we think that a more stable weekly engagement, that's what all the research shows, builds well-being and builds connection. and does the things that I think are the important things to do. I don't care about putting on a service. I care about changing your life, right? That's what I want to do. And I'm not going to do it. These people that you get together with, they're going to do it, right? So my job is to create a place where you can do that.
Look like a satellite church. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So and our plan was to start one. We started one in the West End, and then we wanted to start one somewhere else a year later. We stepped back from that because of the review, and then we thought, why would we do that? So we leaned in instead, and that's why we're working in the core of the city now, pulling a team together to do that. And if anyone's interested in anything like that, connect with me and we can talk.
I might be.
Yeah.
I might be.
Okay. Good. I think there's lots of. The curve. Think of that graph. The curve is like this, right? Like so many people who could come together if they had
Absolutely, yeah.
the leadership that could bring them into spaces like that. Yeah, I think it would be important. Is that it? Oh, yes.
Has anyone else in the United Church, other ministers, reached out to you privately to see how they could replicate what you've done?
A number of people reach out privately, yeah. There is one minister, two ministers actually, at a church in Edmonton who have gone out of their way to show support to West Hill, they started a petition which has been going throughout the church the last week. They have addressed the moderator and the general secretary. The people in their congregation have held meetings to figure out what they can do and what they will do if West Hill leaves the United Church of Canada. They're a congregation that is led by a woman who found refuge in the United Church when her denomination denied her because of her sexuality. So she found a home, an oasis in the United Church of Canada, and who feels now that home is turning its back on her because she has created a post-theistic community that gathers together based on values rather than on, doctrinal statements. So that community is very solid. There is a community in Moncton which has also been on the edge of this kind of work. And there is a community in Saskatchewan, in Regina in Saskatchewan, who has been on the edge of this work. And those are the ones that are really visible. Lots of clergy, like some clergy, one clergy person saw that at presbytery, I wouldn't sing any of the songs. I find most of the words in the songs deeply offensive, so I don't sing them. And he came up to me and said, "Oh, poor Gretta, I can't sing the songs." And I said, "No, I can't sing the songs." He goes, "Well, I just crossed my fingers behind my back," right? Okay, I'm going to write that down and send it to somebody. That's what a lot of people say, stuff like that. And they think that that's being supportive. It's not being supportive. It's really saying, I'm happy to watch you sink over there, and then I'll decide whether or not I want to get in the water, right? So, but I think that this is, we've been asking for this dialogue, and we got a disciplinary process instead, which we think is unhelpful and damaging. And as soon as they created this theological line, and that's what religion has done. Religion is about dividing people up, right? So they just drew a line, right? My congregation in 2003 it wanted to write a statement of faith so that it would say, this is where we are. If Gretta leaves and we get another minister, we don't want to go back into that theological stuff. So we're going to write our own statement of faith. They sat around the table, and the first thing that happened, someone said, "I don't believe the Bible is the authoritative word of God." And someone else said, "Oh, but I'm not so sure about that." And they recognized that the first thing put a line down the middle of the table. And so if we wrote a statement of faith, half people are going to be included, half of them are going to be out. So they decided, we're not going to write a statement of faith. We're going to write a statement of values. How do we want to live? That's what we're going to write. And that's what's guided this community all this time. So, yeah. I wish more clergy were more open about, and someone who's a member of Metropolitan Community Church, came out to West Hill. He's been a supporter for a long time, and he came out to West Hill a few weeks ago, and I said that, I don't see the clergy who are supporting me. And he went through the whole petition and pulled out all the names of clergy, so I would see that there were clergy who were supportive, and that was beautiful. It was a lovely gesture.
Well, when I came out as an atheist, I'd always been an atheist, but when I became more comfortable and started looking into the community, I found that the atheist community almost is non-existent. There's all sorts of atheists out there, but they're really disjointed.
Yes, that's right.
And even our group, it doesn't seem to grow much between there's a lot of people signed up, but there's
Yeah.
really a core of people who show up all the time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so something like this.
And we've got, like, if you talk about the Fowler's stages of faith, I mean, most people stay in stage 3 most of their lives, where they've assimilated what they've been taught and they don't really question it. And then there's that cliff that goes into stage 4, when everything falls apart, right? And you start realizing that it's stories, what? And there's this whole stage 4 section, which is traumatic for a lot of people. And sometimes people never get out of that stage, right? They stay in that stage for the rest of their lives, and they're angry and they're pissed off. And I think humanist communities over the past couple of decades have had a lot of that going on in them. And it's time now to move past that. Now, within a Christian church, people move into stage 5, which is, okay, I know that stuff is all stories now, but now I'm going to live it as a story, right? So that's where you get the permission to continue talking about the virgin birth and the stars, and because you know they're all pretend, right? I think that's problematic, right? I think, because that looks and smells like stage 3, so everybody who's in stage 3 thinks that's still what you're talking about. So I have a real issue with people who promote that. But I think stage 6, which is past that one, is about giving ourselves away. It's about getting beyond those stories and actually giving ourselves away without care of what the cost is to us personally, or as a community, or as a group. Like, how do we give ourselves away? And I think that's where we have to get to. And if we can get beyond the anger and the dialogue about religion, and start getting to the place where we can tell our own story and tell it vibrantly and passionately enough that it helps us give ourselves away, I think that would be great. Loyal Rue, who's a philosopher, talks about a noble lie. And he talks about religion as a noble lie, which, like insects, which look like twigs, religion is this noble lie that allowed us to survive. But he says it's falling apart. The old stories are falling apart. We need to come up with a new noble lie. And in my second book, I argue with that. I think we have a story that is a noble truth that we can tell. And if we can tell that story in an inspirational and poetic way that rivets people's attention to it, I think that will go a long way to getting us to that place where we give ourselves away.
So when is this coming to Oakville?
Send me an email. All we have to do is get a group of people together who's going to make it happen, right? I can't be here every week, but yes, George.
Gretta, so we've been kind of hearing about what West Hill does and similar organization. What do you think of the role of groups like ours should be? What is the thing that you think would be useful, kind of our role in this evolution of, I'm not sure how to put it, but how can we be more effective, and frankly, what should we be effective at?
Well, and I think that you're probably very effective at what it is that you do, because people continue to come together to engage around that. So I'm guessing that's mostly dialogue, speakers, topics, engage around a certain issue. And that, I mean, for me, the big thing is inspiration. We need to be inspired. We need to be inspired to be who we are, right? And someone sent me a quote slide a couple of days ago that said, a warrior's job is to get up every morning and stretch someone's heart open, like you stretch the heart open. And if we do that, I mean, clearly that's a metaphor, right? Just checking. If we do that, like, I think that we live more passionately, and we live with that less fear of what it's going to cost us. And I mean, this process has cost me incredibly. I said to Murray that I almost drove off a cliff yesterday. I was kind of joking, but I was so distraught yesterday I could hardly think. Like, I felt I had been totally betrayed by people. And that, it was a horrible feeling. Like, I went down to the water and I sat there by myself for about 3 hours. And I didn't know what to do with myself, because there's no one I can talk to about that kind of pain. When you hit that kind of pain, there's very few people that you'll reach out to, right? So I just went to be by myself, right? And what we do is going to cost us. So coming together and talking about this kind of stuff is important. I don't want to belittle that at all. That's an important thing for you to do. But where are you going to teach each other how to pour your lives out for another generation that you will never see? or for a people that will never thank you for doing it. You know, where are you going to learn to do that? In a discussion? Or are you going to find a poet or an artist or someone who's going to help you touch that part of you that needs to be touched, needs to be changed, needs to be challenged? So, I mean, you have a group that's going here regularly, and if you want to have that group support the creation of another kind of inspirational sort of community that gathers together around, I mean, the Oasis communities in the States bring in speakers, inspirational speakers. The one thing is, not one, there's a few things, but they have to be fabulous speakers. They can't be lecturers, you know, with a PowerPoint. They have to be able to engage people. And they bring in bands. They have like an online sign up for bands, and it's like booked 3 or 4 months in advance because the bands want to come and play for these people. And they come and they play, like it's a diverse, eclectic musical repertoire that's offered to these people, right? And some of it is moving, and some of it is like, you know, jump up and down and celebrate, and some of it is downright depressing. But it introduces people to the different ways of touching that place inside them that needs to be touched. I'm just about done here in terms of my voice. So any more questions? Mm-hmm.
Actually, just a short one. Have you ever heard of something online called the Clergy Project?
Yes, I was a director of the Clergy Project for about 3 years, and I've moved on to, I'm a director of the Oasis Network now. But yes, the Clergy Project is, and that's, you know, when I say there's clergy all over the place who don't believe, I know there are clergy all over the place who don't believe. And I know some in my own denomination who are members of the Clergy Project who don't believe, who are not going to let anyone know. That's a highly confidential group, right? Because people's lives are at risk, right? Like they lose. There used to be a guy who would come and sit at West Hill in the back pews. He was a Pentecostal worship leader, played in the band. And he would come and stay and visit us at West Hill every now and then when he'd take a Sunday off and come. If anyone had found out he had been in that pew, he would have lost his wife, his children, his job, his everything. He would have lost everything. Like, I am asking liberals to give up a few hymns and some language. Like, it's not a big step, right? When people have so much else that they can risk, you know, by not believing. Yeah, we're a very safe group. But yeah, the Clergy Project is doing brilliant work. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So your idea, like, regardless of whether it's, you know, a church or a community center, it seems like it's based on having always like a central, like a person up in the front speaking to an audience, right?
It can be, but there are a variety of ways that people find that place, right? And some of it is through art, through music, through movement, through dance. There's a huge growth in ecstatic dance communities in the city. I mean, a lot of people connect in different ways. There are some people who will connect because they have an inspirational speaker in front of them, right? But that's not going to meet everyone's needs, clearly. But we need to validate things like the ecstatic dance movement as a significant community building reality, right, in our city, and invite people to experience it and join it, right? So yeah, but often it is, yeah. And that's the model I've been trained in, right? So that's the model I'm the most comfortable with.
Okay, it's just though so I don't know, I've never been to this group before, like I just came because I heard you were speaking, but from what I understand, it's more of a, generally the gatherings are more of a discussion, right, rather than like a, I
can't answer that.
Well, when I went to the church there last January,
No. He's asking about your group here. Yeah, your group here.
Like
Yeah.
usually you guys.
I think we have sometimes movies, we have sometimes documentaries, we have speakers, we had an interview, live interview. We have a kind of affiliated group called Café Scientifique that talks about scientific subjects, and it's mainly secular and scientific, and I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, so
but
it's the gathered, yeah.
We don't try to inspire you or to kind of tell you to do something.
Yeah.
We are
You're
just
engaged. Yeah.
a group that we have common interest,
But
and
you-
I think that by the nature of our common interest, we interact.
But it's centered more. What I'm trying to get at, it's centered more around discussion rather than listening to
Well,
a
we usually
singular
discuss
person.
among ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, we listen
So-
and then we discuss. I
So-
mean, those documentaries.
Yeah.
We discuss them after we see them.
So that brings me around though back to when you say that like you talk about a group like this one where you say like are you really comfortable saying that that's the way it really works for the majority of people, that they need to hear like a central speaker speak poetically or whatever, and that some people can find meaning in like more just as much in a group like this where it's more based around just a group of people all sort of talking amongst themselves rather than because it's sort of it just comes off as very like you're saying if it smells like a church and et cetera and
Yeah.
listening to
Yeah, I hear you.
a central person like just sort of
Yeah.
talk at everyone
Yeah.
it's sort of
Yeah,
goes
absolutely.
back to that.
And that's, I think, one of the things that's happening in the Oasis movement is it's starting out with an individual, like if you're a member of the community, individuals in the community stand up and they sort of give their testimony, kind of, like what's
Yeah.
their life story. Or it may be someone who's like just got a breast cancer diagnosis and is talking about how they have experienced that or something. So the community shares bravely with one another, and then there's a break and everybody engages, and then there's a speaker, right, who speaks, right? So, and I think that those communities will develop and evolve differently in every setting, based on who the people are that are organizing it.
okay fair enough.
Hit that time.
I'm not recording anymore.